The PGA Tour just took playoff money away from 25 of its own members. Bonus checks that once reached down to number 150 now stop at 125. Winners' points in Memphis fell from 2,000 all the way to 750. Brooks Koepka returned after years away and was told the bonus pool is completely off limits to him. Accountants call that restructuring. The men actually hitting the shots use a very different word for it. You might assume the membership approved all of it. Most players learned the details the same way you did, through a cold January press release. 6 months of quiet resentment later, 12 stars have their own answer, and it is brutally simple. Refuse to play under it and watch the panic spread. That is how a new system built to save golf dragged the tour into genuinely big trouble right before the FedEx Playoffs. And once you trace the money, this whole golf season reads differently. Do me one favor before we dig in. Hit that subscribe button, then drop your first reaction in the comments because I read every single one. Now let us talk about what really happened. The document that did the damage went out on a quiet Thursday in the middle of January, buried under the noise of a new season kicking off in Hawaii. Nobody framed it as an attack. The winner of the FedEx St. Jude Championship in Memphis used to walk away with 2,000 points toward the season-long crown. That number is now 750. A player can pour 4 days of his life into the hardest stretch of the calendar and collect barely a third of what the same win banked a year earlier. The bonus pool got its own quiet trim, sliding down from the top 150 players to the top 125, which means 25 men who budgeted around that check found it gone without a single shot being struck. Brooks Koepka came back to the tour after his years away and got handed the coldest welcome of all. 5 major titles between him and the rest of the field. And he was told the bonus money is locked behind a door he cannot open in 2026. If he grinds his way to East Lake, he can still chase a piece of the $40 million purse. But the season-long reward that everyone else plays for stays sealed off from him entirely. Every one of those choices reads like spreadsheet math from the outside. Inside the locker room, the men living it landed on a harsher description because they understood something the press release worked hard to hide. This was never really about points or pools. The same organization that spent 2 years mocking LIV Golf for its shrunken fields and its guaranteed money and its closed-shop feel had quietly started copying the homework it once called cheating. Tears were coming. Relegation was coming. A committee wearing Tiger Woods' name as armor was drawing up a future that looked suspiciously like the enemy the tour had sworn to defeat. Matt Fitzpatrick said the quiet part out loud when he pointed out that a 2-tier tour is already here in everything but name, with the top players skipping regular events and hollowing out the fields nobody famous shows up for. The fine print was there for anyone willing to read it, and the players who mattered most were among the last to actually see it. To understand why that stings, you have to remember who Rory McIlroy was to this tour before any of this started. When LIV Golf came swinging with Saudi billions and the sport nearly split down the middle, the commissioner needed a face brave enough to stand at the podium and take the incoming fire. He got McIlroy. Press conference after press conference, the man defended the tour's honor, absorbed the criticism, and spent reputation he can never fully earn back. He later admitted the role cost him more than he realized at the time. This is a player who has banked close to $70 million from the FedEx Playoffs alone across his career. A golfer who overpowers courses off the tee the way few humans ever have, who turned Augusta into his personal proving ground this April with a Masters win that finally completed his career slam. Loyalty and firepower rolled into one man. That is the champion the tour is now watching drift toward the exit, and the drift is not subtle if you know where to look. It did not arrive as a press conference or a signed letter. It showed up as empty tee times. McIlroy skipped the St. Jude Championship in Memphis last summer, and a player director on the policy board admitted he was very concerned about it, hinting that rule changes were being cooked up behind closed doors to stop stars from doing exactly that. There is stuff in the works, he said, and left it hanging there like a threat. This season, the pattern deepened. He passed on the $20 million Truist Championship. He He walked away from the Travelers, the final big-money signature event of the year, and spent the week strolling a links course in England with a broadcaster instead. One golf writer did the brutal arithmetic and pointed out that across 3 straight signature events between the Masters and the PGA Championship, not a single one featured both McIlroy and Scottie Scheffler on the same grounds. The 2 biggest names in the sport had already built quiet, separate schedules, dodging the very events the tour was selling as must-see. The refusal everyone is now talking about did not begin this month. It has been unfolding in plain sight, one skipped event at a time, while the machine that runs golf kept insisting everything was fine. And here is the detail that should worry headquarters most. When a qualified player chooses to sit out a playoff event, the rules say the field simply shrinks and no alternate gets called up. The empty chair stays empty. The system is built to let stars walk without ever forcing a replacement into the spotlight. None of it detonated, though, until McIlroy opened his mouth on a Tuesday at Shinnecock Hills. The U.S. Open sat 1 week away from Brian Rolap's grand unveiling of the 2-track future, and a reporter asked the tour's former top soldier what he made of the plan. He did not hedge, and he did not soften a word of it. He called the entire second tier a glorified corn ferry event, said that was all it would ever be, and warned that proud old tournaments like the Canadian Open would lose their standing the moment a sponsor refused to hand over $30 million. The clip hit Golf Channel's account, and the golf world came apart at the seams. Fans replayed it. Rival players quietly nodded along. Media rooms scrambled to figure out whether the sport's most important voice had just declared war on the sport's new boss, 7 days before that boss stepped to the microphone. Then came the line that actually drew blood. McIlroy looked back at the whole bloody LAV era and said the way the tour operated before any of the chaos was honestly pretty good, that the war created a false economy of inflated purses and shrunken fields, and now that the threat had faded, the old ways were not so bad after all. Sit with what that means coming from him. The man who took every bullet for the modernization project just stood up and suggested the entire rebuild was a solution to a problem that no longer exists. The soldier questioning why the army is still marching. For a player defined by hunger and by heartbreak in equal measure, it was the sound of a man who no longer trusts the cause he suffered for, and he barely bothered to disguise it. What happened over the next 7 days is the part nobody has properly explained. Rolap got on the phone with McIlroy privately, had what he later described as a quiet chat, and then walked out to announce his sweeping changes anyway. And McIlroy, the same man who had torched the plan in front of the world, released a polished statement calling the announcement a positive step for professional golf, praising its commitment to meritocracy, saying the sport was finally putting fans first. Same plan, same week, completely opposite verdict. The golf public did not swallow the reversal for 1 second, and the obvious question hung in the air like heat over a Memphis fairway. What exactly gets said in a private call that flips the sport's most stubborn voice inside a week? That gap, that unexplained turn, is the real engine of this entire story, and it points at a truth far bigger than one man's mixed feelings. Because the refusal at the center of the title was never a signed boycott with 12 names on a page. It is something quieter and far more dangerous to the people running the show. A slow, spreading unwillingness to play along with a system nobody in the locker room actually voted for with enthusiasm. And once you start counting the voices, the number gets real in a hurry. Lucas Glover, one of the most outspoken pros of the last few years, looked at the rule barring top-tier players from ever dropping down to smaller events and flatly said it stinks, even as he admitted he understood the cold commercial logic behind it. People a lot smarter than me are making these calls, he shrugged, but it is going to have to be the way it is. Hardly a ringing endorsement. Nick Taylor stood up before his home Canadian Open and asked, without ever getting a straight answer, what happens to a national championship that means everything to him if it gets shoved into the lower track? Andrew Novak pointed out that rookies already start at a disadvantage, and this only widens the gap Justin Thomas openly griped about 3 signature events and 2 majors crammed into 6 brutal weeks. These are not fringe complainers. These are the men whose bodies and reputations the tour is built on, and they are pushing back in every direction at once. Rolap's answer to all of it tells you plenty about the collision course ahead. "We are not a tour that puts guys under contract," he insisted. "It is not in their DNA. It is not how the thing is built." Translation for the fans at home: he cannot actually force anyone to tee it up, which is precisely the loophole the stars keep exploiting. Worse for the traditionalists, he has floated the idea of blowing up the playoff format all over again, hinting the season could one day end in some kind of match play, tearing down the very stroke play finale the tour only just rebuilt after scrapping the confusing starting strokes gimmick. The finish line keeps moving, and the players are being asked to sprint toward it on faith. The loudest voice in the whole saga, though, might belong to the man saying nothing at all. Scottie Scheffler has spent this season doing what he always does: quiet, ruthless, dominant. The world number 1 who lets his golf do the shouting. Yet buried inside the new structure sits a rule that could ban him from the CJ Cup Byron Nelson, the tournament where a 17-year-old kid with his own sister carrying the bag first announced himself to professional golf. He won that event by 8 shots not long ago and could barely hide what it meant to him. Now, the system he loyally shows up for every single week might tell him his hometown stage is off limits because it landed on the wrong tier. Scheffler stays quiet the way he always does. But that silence has weight now, and it says more about the fracture than any quote could. His core instinct never changes. Show up, compete, dominate, and the tour has found a way to punish the one man who embodies everything it claims to want. Step back far enough, and this stops looking like a golf story at all. A former television executive who never earned a single tour card now holds the pen that rewrites the sport, borrowing the playbook his own organization once branded as heresy, stamping a legend's name on the paperwork, and steering the whole thing straight toward its own playoffs, while the biggest stars quietly wonder whether the game still belongs to them. The $10 million check waiting at East Lake has never been fatter, yet the men chasing it have never sounded less convinced. The race is fair. The FedEx Playoffs kick off in Memphis on August 12th, and the field will not officially be short, but the meaning already is. That is the real trouble the numbers were hiding all along. If you want the full breakdown of who could actually go missing when the playoffs arrive and what it means for the rest of the season, subscribe and stick around, because this story is only getting started, and I want your honest take in the comments below.